Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inclusive Collective, where we share stories and learnings of inclusive people, organizations, and innovation. I'm your co-host, Rob Hadley, a people and culture strategist specializing in DE&I and people analytics. I am joined by my co-host, Nadia, an organizational development and belonging strategist. Nadia, it is fantastic to see you. How you doing?
Oh, it's always so good to see you, Rob. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I noticed we're both a little cash today.
Yeah. I
We're,
mean,
we're,
people
we're a little
can't
more
see us because
casual
it's a
than usual.
podcast, but yeah, I'm wearing a hoodie, wearing a headband, kind of threw my hair up in a
Well, we
bun.
post links to there's visuals that go out on social media, right?
That's
So,
true.
this is good. This is going to show up, right? But
Yeah, we should.
I'm unshaven, and you're a little more. You got like a sweatshirt on
I got a
today.
sweatshirt. Yeah,
We have no
sweatshirt.
guests today, so I always do most of my hair and makeup, because I know that there's a guest every week. So I'll be like 10 minutes before we're recording. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, I have to shave for this person, and I'll
Oh, you're so good.
apply.
Yeah, usually
Uh,
I'm like, oh, I should
yeah.
like brush my hair. But today I was like, no, I'm just gonna throw it up. This is what
Yeah,
Rob's gonna get.
just the two of us.
Yeah.
Just the two of
We
us.
were earlier talking with our producer, Ari, and I think they were just laughing at us like hilariously, just being like, what is wrong with like you guys just show up, just like whatever, we're here, we're doing it.
Well, we're old pros at this point,
Yeah.
Nadia.
Well, thank you for showing up as authentically as you would like to. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Should we get to the deets? There's a lot going on this week.
Yes, let's start.
Okay.
Go ahead and tell me what you got for us.
Okay. So last week it was determined that Goldman Sachs will have to pay $215 million to settle a large group
Okay.
of former and current female employees where systemic discrimination was at play again. The lawsuit covers about 2,800 women who have held associate and vice president positions at the bank's U.S. investment banking, investment management, and securities divisions from around the early 2000s up until late March this past year. The lawsuit was first filed in 2010. Like, this is wild.
Right.
2010.
Yeah.
And it alleged that Goldman discriminated against women in terms of compensation, promotion, performance evaluations, and business opportunities. So, like career advancement. It also alleges that
Sure.
female employees were paid less than their equally ranked male counterparts and had fewer opportunities to move up ranks. So, we're saddened, but not surprised. And I
Well,
will let you kind of share your thoughts on this.
well, it's 2010. Hopefully, there have been some changes over the course of the last 13 years. I did think about it as you were reading that 215 million. I was like, well, I guess Goldman Sachs probably looks around their couch cushions,
Yeah, I
right,
know. It's like
and
pennies to
finds
them.
and can find $215 million to pay these 2,800 women.
Right.
So, thinking about the lawsuit, I have long thought that I could leverage my experience, my expertise into some sort of analytics work on discrimination cases.
Yeah.
I have felt that from previous roles that the lawyers that made the request for information to be able to prove something like this didn't necessarily know what they were looking at or looking for.
Yeah.
And so this story made me think that maybe that's not a great idea. The fact that this lawsuit was filed in 2010 and it took this long to come to a resolution. And it's not like it was actually resolved. It's not like they actually got what they were looking for.
Yeah.
But the 2,800 women, they'll get paid, right? They'll get something.
I hope so.
And
Yeah, for sure.
I will say, Nadia, right? So based on my experience, that I think performance data is just an absolute goldmine of proof of discrimination. And I'm always interested in how companies, what kind of quantitative measure people are applying to performance and what kind of documentation there is in performance data. And so it's a really quantified expression of bias if you dig into a lot of this stuff.
Sure.
So think about it. Like, so for the second half of the 21st century, right? Companies codified performance ratings. Think about how biased those people processes were.
Yeah.
For, from 1950 on, and people
that haven't been
that
improved
data.
upon.
So it's just
right.
It's a treasure trove of data. And so I would think that, I don't know if companies are thinking about what do I do with this data, or if there are lawyers out there looking at, hey, should we dig into this, or if there are class action suits that could take advantage of this. But it seems to me like it's just there's a lot of opportunities for suits like this to move forward if people knew what they were looking for.
Are you surprised that this is happening in the investment industry, like in the investment world, because it's such a
No.
fast pace, right? Like I'm not either. It's interesting because we absolutely have talked about this in previous episodes. And, my observations, just even partnering with some organizations that are in the investment world, like it's a fast paced environment. There's very little flexibility. The women that do tend to enter into this industry tend to leave it because there's a lack of flexibility. There is pay disparities. And there's also a lack
Hmm.
of opportunities for advancement. So, like, women are leaving this industry because of that discrimination. So, if, Goldman Sachs is kind of, one of these top investment organizations. So these other ones, these little ones, they better follow suit and get some pay equity analysis in there, start making some changes, because people are going to recognize that they are not being treated fairly, and lawsuits will happen. So,
There's nothing that surprises me from the banking sector, right? I mean, they pay fines every week for some sort of
something.
for
Yeah.
some sort of
It's pennies to them, which is so
impropriety.
frustrating. Yeah.
And yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me, but all good points. And I do think that since 2010, there has been quite a bit of progress in terms of, and I think lawsuits like this, where they knew that eventually they're going to have to pay out for it,
Mhm.
and other banks looked at it as well, then they have some impact on the behavior of the banks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Shall we move on?
All right, Nadia. So next story, and Nadia, this next segment of the show, it's going to be for mature audiences only. So
Okay.
if there's a kid listening, you may want to cover their ears. More than a year ago, a group of dancers at a renowned topless dive bar in Los Angeles embarked on a journey to secure their rights by unionizing. After countless efforts and unwavering perseverance, their hard work paid off, and in a historic vote, the dancers achieved something remarkable. They became the first and only group of organized strippers in the United States of America. God bless America. And
God
so,
bless America.
Nadia, I didn't know how much went into this.
Yeah.
And so they worked hard for this. They spent a lot of time on this. For 8 months, the strippers and their supporters, they picketed weekly in front of the
Mhm.
Star Garden in North Hollywood. It's one of the busiest bars of this type. And
Mhm.
on some of their busiest nights, the dancers would picket. Each night they had a party. They wore themed costumes. They put on their own runway shows, and they gave directions to other strip clubs for potential patrons. So really great work, really great activism
Yeah.
for these particular dancers. What did you think about this one?
It's great. Listen, they're seeking higher compensation, safer working conditions. It's things that we're all looking for to feel psychologically safe at work. And so I'm all for it. I think Amazon could follow suit. I think Starbucks could continue to follow suit. So get it, y'all. I think, like, yeah, these dancers, strippers, like, they are also employees. And so they deserve higher compensation and fair equity in terms of wages and working conditions just as much as anyone else. So I'm happy for them. Good job.
I like that. Amazon can learn from these
Mm.
dancers,
Come
right?
on, Amazon.
Starbucks can, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
no, these workers have the same rights to a safe, fair environment. What else is there? We applaud their efforts.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back after this break with a couple more stories from this past week.
Welcome back, folks. All right, Rob, we got a couple more stories here.
Yeah, so big one from the New York Times this week, an article titled Why Some Companies Are Saying Diversity and Belonging Instead of Diversity and Inclusion caused quite a stir in our world, the DEI world. In about 5,000 words, the article managed to confuse me to the point that I don't know what belonging is and I don't know what inclusion is anymore. But it
Oh boy.
starts by describing a unique approach, I'm doing air quotes for our listeners, to belonging training, which sounds very similar to the first unconscious bias training that I probably attended in around 2014, where
Okay.
the object is to show everyone that they have bias. And so this was all presented as remarkably fresh and an innovative way in order to get folks on board.
Mm.
Nadia, go ahead and
Mm.
start us off. What do you got for us?
So, okay, so just so I understand too, you had said that there's like belonging training as well. So it's like a concept and an actual, we're renaming unconscious bias training to now belonging training. Is that what you kind of had taken from that?
No, I didn't take anything. I didn't understand anything. So that's,
Okay.
I mean, it,
Yeah.
I didn't understand it all.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that the way that
Yeah.
they presenting this new concept of belonging they laid out a scenario in which a trainer was giving a training to a group of mostly male audience, mostly white male cis audience, and it
Okay.
sounded just like unconscious bias training from
Yeah, right.
8-10 years ago.
Yeah, sure. Well, so here are my thoughts, and we discussed this in season one, probably in season two. Like, belonging is absolutely this concept, right? Like, it's a sense of self. So, should it be discussed? Absolutely, because I think it's a term that has been presented in kind of defining how someone feels in terms of how they feel accepted or valued or respected in the workplace. What I do know about this term, because I've studied it at length, is that it's based in the psychological literature and it has powerful kind of long and short term implications on a person's like positive psychological outcomes. So when we think of like how someone describes how they feel, how they belong is just someone's feelings of being accepted, valued, and respected, right?
Mm-hmm.
But similar terms we use to describe inclusion. So when I read this article and you and I kind of started talking about it, part of me was like, okay, is this just a way to sacrifice terms because of like the anti wokeness movement?
Mm-hmm.
And then it did make me, and you had sent me an additional article, which I'm sure you're going to mention as well. But then it made me really think about like, why did the DEI movement in the workplace start? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is what is really missing and what is really key and powerful to conversations that we have in the workplace related to DE&I. If you want to add the B, go ahead as an outcome of all
Right.
of the work. But I do think that when we add belonging or replace DE&I with belonging, and we're kind of having this argument about what the term should be or the acronym should be, I feel like we're missing the point and we're
Mm-hmm.
disguising the actual concepts of like white supremacy, anti-racism, and kind of all of the other dimensions of diversity that happen to
Right.
people
Right.
and identities. So I'll pause there because I know
I
you
did.
have
I did tell you that I feel like when people are discussing the terms inclusion and belonging, that it reminds me of the scene in Talladega Nights where they're sitting around the dinner table and everyone's trying to think about or offer their own way that they see Jesus, right? And people are like,
Yeah.
"Well, I see inclusion as this, and I see belonging as this," and then someone else says, "Well, I actually see inclusion like this," and I'm just like, I just want to scream sometimes
Yeah.
when people start having that conversation. I am
Right.
working on a presentation right now that centers belonging, and we're doing that because we see a real angle as an entry point for this
Yeah.
particular client group, their stage of maturity, their the size of the organization, the makeup of that group demographically, and so we use it as an entry point. But we don't want to replace the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion with this very with this concept of belonging, which is centering the discomfort of white people in
Right.
organizations as opposed to doing the real hard work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. So um,
Yeah.
the we also had a conversation, Nadia, about how the fact that we don't think that we're doing anything new a lot of times. Right. We're often talking about effective management and leadership, and that
Yeah.
in 2023, of course, an effective manager or leader would have to have facility with the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and obviously the
Yeah.
impact on belonging in their organization, their team. So I don't care what you
Yeah.
call it either. We had Maggie Roque from Zapier. They call
Yeah.
it Dibby, right? And I worked with orgs that call it ID&E. It's more about the actions that you're taking, right, in the organization. And you know, if you take out any of the elements, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for.
Yeah. One thing I think is really critical to bring up is like the literature on belonging. It considers like this socio ecological interaction. When we define kind of what belongingness means, there's multiple systems at play that measure factors such as like well being, your social interactions in the workplace with people, like your job satisfaction, your self-esteem, even considerations of like what happens outside of the workplace. How engaged are you? So your disengagement in work,
Mm-hmm.
turnover, right? So all of these things inform belonging. And the body of literature on like conceptualizing belonging, it all comes down to one thing. And this is like a basic fundamental human need to want to be part of something, right?
Sure.
And so I think it's interesting because, like, translated in the workplace, belonging is an outcome of work. And all of the work that DEI practitioners are doing now, I feel like I feel I don't know, it feels like we're trying to make people feel comfortable about facing or having more tough conversations, which are
Right.
like considering differences, embracing differences, becoming more aware. And at the end of the day, like, belonging is, yeah, it's a concept that is part of that entire system of DE and I. And so I think there's power in practitioners, including myself, as I become still like more self-aware, to acknowledge like the historical roots of DEI in America, and how that goes back to the 60s, right? Like the civil rights movement, you had the anti-discrimination legislations in that time, the Equal Pay Act was incorporated then. And I think those are really defining moments in our history that are rooted as underpinnings for the work that we're doing today. And it's a disservice if we don't talk about that when we do DE&I work. So now I feel
Right.
like I'm ranting.
No, I think that's great. And I appreciate you bringing that perspective. I know that you do quite a bit of work in this field, right? In terms of the study and literature review that you do. In the same light, so we're talking about belonging. I did want to turn you and our listeners on to an article in Nonprofit Quarterly that came
Mhm.
out this couple of weeks ago. It's the business case for DEI reinforces anti-Black sentiment, and that's by Amira Barger. And so Barger argues that DEI makes four cases for its, for its importance. And so there's a case for market alignment, a moral case, an economic case, and a results case, all of which have their
Mm,
roots in capitalism, and
yeah.
that greater emphasis is needed on the intersectionality of personal, interpersonal, institutional, and the societal shifts necessary to create workplaces with true diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it just brings up a lot for me as well, just like the belonging article did,
Yeah.
for you. And as a person that is often called upon to make the business case or has been in that position of making the business case for DEI through data,
Mhm.
and I've really tried to steer away from it recently. First, the business case is misunderstood, so that doesn't help. I think that it's often
Right.
presented as, if you do this then you get this, and it really emphasizes to underrepresented folks, marginalized or minoritized folks, that we'll take your oppression seriously if there's money in it for us. And
Yeah.
I think that that's problematic as well. So
Bad
so
behaviors.
yeah, so any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great point because I struggle with this too in terms of like pointing out the business case to leaders, especially when you're talking to someone of the dominant group, so like a white male. And oftentimes you're right, it's like they're incentivized because there's something on the other side in terms of capital, right? Capitalism. So I challenge not only like other practitioners, but myself to really dig deeper about how we can explain the business case in a way that doesn't tokenize and further perpetuate, like, folks that are marginalized. Because it's interesting, even just this morning, I got a text from someone who said, I'm trying to coach someone on recruitment, and it seems like the people that have been recruited are starting to be resented by their colleagues. And
Mm,
I was like, "Oh, tell me more about that. Why?" And there was such a spike of recruiting marginalized groups of people, particularly Black at this one company, that they are now being there's now this like rivalry, or you've been hired because of X, Y, and Z, not because of your qualifications or your background, or you add to the team because of your differences or because of your background and your perspective and experience. And so now there's this dimension of jealousy or just this culture that's being built that's not creating great behaviors. And
mm-hmm,
so I do challenge folks to think about the business case from a perspective that does not perpetuate marginalized identities being tokenized or
mm-hmm.
being weaponized. And then, of course, like you said, for only to, build revenue or to gain profit.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a great article. Actually, we should post it. I think we should share it so other folks can read it as well.
For sure. For sure. Well, thanks for that great discussion, Nadia. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with rants and raves. Welcome back, everyone, to Inclusive Collective. Nadia, it is that time. We had a good discussion so far. Let's hear, you have a rant for us to close us out today.
I have a rant, and it's about your least favorite person.
Oh, no.
So Ron DeSantis, aka Ronnie D, last week he officially banned DE&I in Florida colleges. So he signed a law into effect last Monday, a bill that dismantles DEI at Florida's public universities and colleges. The law bans courses that distort significant historical events, teach identity politics, or are based on theories that systemic racism, sexism, oppression, or privilege are inherent in the institutions of the U.S., et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, my rant here is that he's an idiot. His politics are idiotic. And I got to say this because this is real for many of us and our peers, but to our peers in the DE&I, HR, academic spaces, to the students and the professors who are missing out on the teaching of real history, of inequities, injustice, being misinformed on how this country was built, shaped, and formed. We see you, we're thinking of you, and either vote him out or move to Massachusetts.
I didn't really get the part that if there was a misrepresentation of historical events, I didn't realize that was part of it. So they basically would just have to throw out all of their history courses.
Yeah, distort significant historical events. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what about insignificant? Everything gets tossed.
I'm going to distort those on this show. I'm going to misrepresent insignificant historical events, right? And no one can say anything about it.
There you
I
go.
do that all the time, actually. That's most of the time when I'm speaking. So, but take a moment to reflect, Nadia, on how much damage that he's doing to Florida. I think that the universities themselves will suffer. The students, obviously, as you laid out. But Disney just pulled out of a massive development project as well, costing the state, a couple $1 billion, over 2,000 jobs, over DeSantis's posturing around the company's support for LGBTQ issues. And so, his claim to fame, if you remember, right? Where does this person? I was trying to where does this person even come from? Where is he? He was against masks, right? That's the one thing that he's ever done or been or had any, any kind of thoughts on. Yeah. And congratulations, because it was easy to do in a state where everyone was outside, right, all winter, right? So
right.
Right. So the one thing he has going for him is Florida's climate. That's the only thing that he's ever done right. Was he lived in a warm state where he could tell everyone not to wear masks. And so the Ron DeSantis story ends badly for him. Unfortunately, we'll all have to put up with it for at least a short time longer, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully not too much longer.
Hopefully not too much longer. Who knows what announcements might be made in the next few weeks, but yeah.
So, all right. So on a positive note, Nadia,
let's end on a positive note. Tell me.
If you remember last week, all the way back to last week, I was not loving the Oscars, right? Do you remember that?
I remember this. Yeah.
And so a new list, which I have found, and is to me a much more impressive way to recognize movies, and it's called the Inclusion List. Okay. So this is a data-driven ranking of movies from 2019 to 2022, led by Dr. L. Stacy Smith and the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. This list, which has a website, highlights the top distributors associated with the movies on the list, names 8 individuals as the top producers of diverse and inclusive films, and also highlights the top directors for inclusion across the time evaluated. So let's check out the list. Nadia, are you ready? Most inclusive films. Number 1, The Woman King. You saw The Woman King, right? You really like The Woman King?
I didn't see it yet, but I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. It's on my list, though.
On my list now, because it's on the inclusion list, and that's what I follow now to figure out what movies are good. The Farewell. Other notables include number 15, Parasite, number 22, Wakanda Forever.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Ranking at the bottom was any movie with Richard Dreyfuss, curiously. I don't know. And the most inclusive studio was Universal. So Universal has had some success with movies like Harriet, Queen and Slim. Did you see Queen and Slim?
No.
Oh, so good.
I see more series
Everybody
than I see
knows.
movies, but okay. Yeah, but
I watch movies on planes. That's it. If I'm not on a plane, I'm not watching a movie.
Yeah.
MGM was the lowest ranking of the major studios, and Will
Okay.
Packer was the producer with the highest inclusion score. So
Okay.
we're going to have this link in the show notes. We're going to put it in our newsletter.
That's great.
This is how I'm going to choose my movies now. The inclusion list.
Okay. That's great. I love that. Fantastic. We should probably share that list with our friends at Solio Space too.
For sure.
Yeah. Very good. Well, Rob, thank you for this week. Great news updates here. Folks, Inclusive Collective is a production of Rifelion Media. We'd love to hear from you. So send us your feedback at inclusivecollective@rifelion.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for now. We're not in Montana. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to get in touch with us for consulting, check out me at nafconsultants.com and Rob at tacanoconsulting.com. Thank you again, folks. Rob, great episode. Thank you. We'll be back next week.
We love you, Montana.